Also, one thing I want to point out when I'm doing this, the toms. You notice on this one, I cleaned them.
Sure.
And back in the old days when we didn't have the Pro Tools, we'd gate a lot of times, and sometimes the toms with the bleed of the snare of the kick
would trigger the gate.
Well, not only that, but without gating it, it kind of makes the kick and snare bigger because it has like the openness to it. It's not as direct, but also obviously it would make it boomier or it would change the sound. So depending on how much gating you would do, and it's the same thing with what I do here. If I totally mute everything except the toms, I get a much tighter kick and snare. But sometimes I don't totally clean the toms. I'll just automate to where the toms hit like a gate and open up all the way, and then kind of bring it down like 10, 15 dB just to get some of the air from the kick and snare, so it still feels...
almost using it as an expander of sorts, but not necessarily, just kind of bringing the floor up from the gate?
Like a live drum feel to it. Yeah, just not make it so sterile kind of a thing. So
That's cool.
In this case, I did use I cleaned most of it. So, and let me see if, this one, it's not a good example. Sometimes if you only have one kick, well, I mean, one snare, one tom, that, how I fade it out and use all the fades and that kind of stuff. So it all kind of, it sounds like I'm all over the place, but it all is part of how I mix. It's like it's all interweaving together. Kind of
especially when there's so many microphones in conjunction capturing one source, which is the drums. I'm finding now with more engineers that I meet that are just kind of starting up, I mean, they'll talk about the kick drum or the snare drum, but in reality, you're capturing a drummer. You're not capturing a kick drum. You are in a sense, but those all need to translate accordingly to all the other pieces. Like you just said, you'll leave sometimes a little bit of the bleed from the toms for the snare drum because that's how it is. You're never just going to have an isolated the tom will not just be sterile when it's that close to a snare drum being hit.
Well, we're so used to everything being so perfect and so isolated today, so we have the control. And I had that same issue going back to tracking with Daryl, where he wanted to do everything in the room. And I used to do that back in the old day, but I kind of panicked and, whoa, wait a minute. If we do that, then we're going to get bleed into the drums. And so even I kind of got caught thinking the same way. But all that stuff kind of leads to, we're so used to that sterile, perfect environment that we forgot that, when everybody's playing live, you capture something that, that's totally different.
Hey, Cesar Perez, I mean, I think he was kind of joking, but he does bring an interesting point. It's not so easy to do that with the Mana drummer, the tom editing. What do you do when you have a drummer that is not just here where it's very straight and he does a fill every once in a while, where it's like the whole song's got toms on it? Would you be using a gate at that point?
No, but if we're talking about Mana, and if all that stuff, to be honest with you, and I'm not, lying, I guess the word, it's all real. There's no samples on there. So it wasn't, what that did, it was more of a panic of how to get a good drum sound than how to replace and get a good drum sound with samples. I'd have to work at getting a good kick and snare sound from the original. So it was kind of easy that way. I wouldn't, there's no samples. So that was, and I'd work a lot with gates, a lot, even the snare gates. And sometimes even hi-hat. Or trigger a hi-hat with a gate, or do those kind of things. But if there's a lot of toms like this, if you see the file, he's got a lot of floor tom, I just leave it alone.
You just leave it be.
Yeah, because if I start doing every single hit, then that becomes kind of weird. And if you have live drums, and if you start cutting some room or things, you can hear that difference in what's happening. Because I don't, like I said, I don't use the samples solely. I use the live stuff, so the room is all part of it too.